Hello everybody, Mrs. Kipp from Syracuse Academy of Science and Citizenship, back again with a new domain. We just finished our domain on fairy tales and we are moving on to domain 10, A New Nation, American Independence. How exciting. So let's get a little background on what we are going to be learning today, and then we will dive right into it. I'm so excited. All right, for the next several days, we'll be learning about some of the important events and people responsible for the creation of our country, the United States of America. And in the early part of this domain, when you hear about the Pilgrims and other settlers who came from England, those settlers are called English settlers because they came from a country called England. Later, many years after the first English settlers arrived in North America, the country of England became part of a new and larger country known as the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, commonly referred to as Great Britain or simply Britain. Because of this change, you will hear references to England and English settlers when learning about the early colonial time period before 1707. That was a long time ago. And you will also hear references to Great Britain, and the British for the time period after 1707. So, the Pilgrims were not the first English people to settle in North America. In fact, English people had settled in other places in North America before the Pilgrims. In today's read aloud, we are going to learn about some of the other places in North America where the English settled both before and after the Pilgrims arrived. Now let's get to our objectives and we're ready to go. All right, in today's lesson, we will identify the early English settlements on Roanoke Island and in Jamestown as colonies that were established before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. We will explain that the first Africans in the English colonies came to Jamestown as indentured servants, not slaves. We will describe how the 13 colonies in America evolved from dependence on Great Britain to independence as a nation. And we're ready to go. All right. Our first picture is all of the red shaded areas here are the United States. So, this is the North American continent where we live today. Many hundreds of years ago, life in North America was very different than it is today. I can't wait to find out how. The first people who lived in North America are known as Native Americans. The Native Americans lived in groups called tribes in different regions of North America. There were no stores like we have now, so they had to find or make everything they needed to survive, whether it was food to eat, clothing to wear, or a house in which to live. That's very different from today, where we're used to being able to go to the store to get most things that we need. Find out who this is. Hundreds of years later, a European explorer by the name of Christopher Columbus sailed and reached North America, but that was not where he had planned to go. Columbus set sail from Europe, hoping to find a quicker way to reach India and China, where spices, gold, and other riches were plentiful. So he landed in America by accident. But in 1492, when Columbus actually reached land after he sailed the ocean blue, he and his crew did not arrive in India or China. They landed instead in North America, where they met the native people who lived there. So here's Christopher Columbus and his crew, and here's the Native Americans that already lived there. After Columbus's sailors from different countries in Europe traveled to North America. Portugal, Holland, Spain, France, and England all sent explorers to North America, continuing to hope to find riches and goods that they might bring back to trade and sell in Europe. Everyone was interested in this new world. Oh, what do you think's going on here? What meal does that look like? That might be familiar to us. The English did not want to just visit the New World. They were interested in starting settlements in order to live there. They wanted a place for their people to spread out from their small island country, England, across the Atlantic Ocean. You probably remember that English pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock in the 1600s, about 100 years after Columbus. The Pilgrims had great difficulty adjusting to their new life in the New World because it was very different from the city life they knew in Europe. The Native Americans that the Pilgrims met helped them survive, especially during the first year. So this is a picture of them having Thanksgiving together. There's the turkey and corn and pumpkins. Looks good. All right, here's the United States. The Pilgrims were not the only English people to start settlements in North America. In fact, before the Pilgrims ever arrived at Plymouth, the other Englishmen and women had settled in 2 other places. The first English colony was on Roanoke Island, followed by a colony at Jamestown. A colony is a place that is ruled by a faraway country. So the English men and women who moved to and settled Roanoke Island and Jamestown did not make their own rules or laws. The English king and government ruled the colonies. And a government is a particular group of people who make decisions and laws for the people who elect them. Here's a cool picture. The first child born in North America to English parents was born on Roanoke Island. Her name was Virginia Dare. We don't really know what happened to Virginia Dare or the other English settlers living on Roanoke Island because they mysteriously disappeared several years after they arrived. For this reason, Roanoke Colony is often called the Lost Colony. Some people think life was so difficult on Roanoke Island that the colonists left their settlement and went to live with some of the Native American tribes in the area. Remember, the Pilgrims had difficulty too, and depended upon the Native Americans to help them grow and find food. Some people think the Roanoke Island settlers may have gone to live with the Native Americans since they may have run out of food. Wow. It was another 20 years after the Roanoke colony before the English tried to settle again in North America. When they did, 100 English men and boys sailed up a river from the Atlantic Ocean and named the river James in honor of the King of England. The settlement they founded was called Jamestown. Like the other English settlers, the people who came to Jamestown met the Native Americans who were already living in this area. The English wanted to trade goods with them and were especially interested in acquiring the Native Americans' beaver and deer skins to send back to England, where they were able to sell them for a high price. So here is a map of the 13 colonies, still in the United States. As time passed, more and more settlers from Great Britain arrived in North America. All up and down the east coast of North America, they formed more colonies where they started new lives for themselves. By 1732, there were 13 British colonies in North America: Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And here's New York right here. That's where we are. The British did not accomplish the hard work of settling up of setting up colonies all by themselves. They especially needed lots of helpers to clear and farm the land. European ships brought people taken from the continent of Africa to work in the New World. The first Africans to arrive in Jamestown were probably indentured servants. Excuse me. This meant that they were forced to work with no pay for the English colonists for a certain number of years. During this time, the Africans were not free to live or work anywhere else until they had finished working for the agreed-upon number of years. After that time, they were free to live and work where they wanted, and to be paid for that work. As the British colonies grew, more and more workers were needed. Before long, many people from Africa were forced to come to North America and were no longer treated as indentured servants. They were slaves. The slaves did not share the freedoms enjoyed by the colonists. Freedoms are rights to decide what you want to do and how you want to live. They could not leave their farms without permission, and it was against the law for anyone to teach a slave to read or write. As the colonists settled in the colonies, more changes were to come. So this was the route. Here's Africa, and they traveled all that way to North America to bring African Americans to work as indentured servants and then as slaves. All right, that's all the reading we have for today. Let's go over some comprehension questions and then we'll call it a day. All right, number 1. Who were the first people known to live in North America? So who was already there when Christopher Columbus and his crew showed up? They were Native Americans. Number 2. English pilgrims settled Plymouth Colony. Name 2 other English colonies in North America that were settled before the Pilgrims arrived in Plymouth. Excuse me. We heard about Roanoke Island and the lost colony, Jamestown. So, why is Roanoke Island called the Lost Colony? Because the colonists mysteriously disappeared and nobody really knows why or what happened. Number 4, how many British colonies were settled in North America? Remember on the map I showed you, New York was one of them? 13 colonies total. Number 5, were the first Africans that arrived in Jamestown indentured servants or slaves? They were indentured servants. And in what ways were indentured servants and slaves similar? They both had to work, at least for a period of time, without getting paid and without having freedom. And the ways that they were different was an indentured servant had to work for a certain number of years and was then free to choose where they wanted to work and what they wanted to, how they wanted to live. And a slave was never free and always had to work for no money. What did the colonists want indentured servant? Why did the colonists, want indentured servants and slaves? Or why did they need so much help? What was the reason behind wanting to get indentured servants and slaves? They wanted them to do the hard work needed to start the colony, like clearing the land and farming. All right, number 7, who governed and ruled the 13 British colonies? The King of Great Britain or the people who lived in the colonies? The King of Great Britain and the British government are the ones who governed and ruled the 13 British colonies. All right. An important vocabulary word from today's lesson was freedoms. In the read aloud, you heard the slaves did not share the freedoms enjoyed by the colonists. Freedoms are rights to decide what you want to do or how you want to live. I have more freedoms now than when I was younger. For example, one of my freedoms now is to choose what clothes I wear to school. What other freedoms do you enjoy? So what are some things that you are allowed to decide how you want to do them or what you want to do? What are some of those freedoms you have? One of the freedoms you guys have now that we're not at school is you can wear whatever you want every day. You don't have to wear a uniform. That's a little bonus freedom you have right now. Although I'd rather see you in your uniform at school. Okay. I am going to name a possible freedom. If it's one of the freedoms that you have in your family, you can say, I have that freedom. If it is not one of the freedoms you have in your family, I want you to say, I do not have that freedom. All right, ready? Number 1, picking out what clothes to wear to school. If you have a dress down pass, you have the freedom to pick out what you want to wear to school. But we wear uniforms at school, so you got a little bit of freedom. Maybe what pants you want to put on, what shoes you want to put on, but you wear your uniform to school. It's one less thing you have to worry about every morning. All right, what about deciding when it's time to go to bed? I hope most of you don't have that freedom because I don't think you would pick an early enough time. Number 3, crossing the street by yourself. You do not have that freedom. Mrs. Kipp said so. Number 4, deciding what to watch on TV. You probably have that freedom for the most part to watch what you want on TV. And the last one, choosing what to eat for lunch. So if you bring your own lunch, you can choose what you want to eat out of your lunchbox. And I know if you're buying lunch, there's choices. You have options. You have the freedom to pick what you want to eat. All right, guys, that's it for today. I miss you so much. Next time, we will be learning about the Boston Tea Party. I can't wait. I miss you again. Have a great night. Bye.